Hello, everyone. As you may now know, I'm making a pretty big shift in my practice and how I work with people. This video is designed to give you an introduction to what that means for you, why I'm doing it, what the technique is, and how that's going to affect your care in my office. First, I'd like to just give a little history on why this is happening and basically about my massive personal experience with this technique. And when I mean massive, I mean massive. I got my life back. Um, some of you know that I had a car accident in 2006 where I broke my back in 10 places. I ruptured some organs and I cracked my pelvis in half. And I was a mess after that. I had sciatic pain down my right leg. Um, I had a hard time doing the things I love to do. Every time I would bike or ski or do yoga, my body would go into a contracted pattern and be very painful for days. Um, After adjusting in the office all day long, I would kind of be limping out, and I thought I was broken. I thought my body was pretty much broken and messed up for the rest of my life until I found this technique. And it's called ABC, Advanced Biostructural Correction. Um, Basically, it gave me my life back, and I am so grateful for finding it, and grateful and excited to be able to bring this technique to you guys. Um, I've been under care myself for about the last 8 months, and probably about 2 months into it had virtually a complete healing around my car accident. This technique is not palliative, which means it doesn't just make you feel better. It actually reverses trauma out of your body and fixes you structurally. So it actually makes you better structurally, and structure and function depend on each other. If you have good structure, you have good posture, and your body will function well. So basically, the progression of things is I had this massive personal experience. I had a tremendous healing. And after that, I was like, okay, I have to study this thing. This is like, I need to understand what is actually going on here with this technique, what is different than what I had been doing. Because I had been getting adjusted in the way that I worked for a long time, and I actually was getting worse. My body was not getting better. I would feel better after an adjustment, and that wouldn't really last very long. And then I would need another adjustment. And that left me feeling dissatisfied with my own care and with my ability to fix people. I don't want people to be dependent on a chiropractic adjustment. I want them actually to be fixed. And that's what this new technique does. So, personal experience, I spent a few months studying the technique and going to seminars and becoming proficient in actually performing it, because it's a bit different than what I've been doing. And then I did a trial. So I needed to know that I could do this thing through my hands, that that it would transmit through me with the people. And so I did a trial with 12 people, 12 of my old practice members. I saw them all twice a week for 3 weeks, and we did some pretty detailed documentation on how they were doing before and how they were doing after, and had some pretty amazing things happen. We had one woman who had been getting migraines, nasty migraines, twice a week, debilitating to where her day was over when they'd kick in. Since the first time I started working on her with this new technique, her migraines are gone. Gone. We had many people that had chronic issues, pain in their body, dissipate. And every single person in the study had massive postural changes, which means that, in our society where everyone is really forward, and, falling over the computer and falling over the steering wheel and falling over their desk, people were able to stand up straight and hold their bodies up without using effort. And that is because your posture is dependent on your structure. If you have poor structure, you have poor posture. That's just how it works. So 3 things. I had a personal experience. I studied the thing. It made perfect sense to me. There was 2 main axioms that were missing out of bodywork and chiropractic over the last 100 years. And these are the 2 missing pieces of why some people would get better and some people would not. And this is why with this technique that people consistently and predictably get better all the time. And that's been my experience so far. So my experience, I studied the technique and then we did a trial and had awesome results. And so starting June 1st, I'm converting the entire practice over to ABC, Advanced Biostructural Correction. And so what is this thing? What's different? Why do I have to make a video to tell you about it? Well, there's a couple truths that I learned throughout studying this work, and one is that the body is a self-correcting machine most of the time. Okay, so if we have a subluxation and a bone goes out of place, if the body has a muscle that attaches on the back side of that bone with leverage in the opposite direction, it will correct it on its own. Okay, so if a bone goes out of place and the body has leverage to fix it on its own, it will. Why wouldn't it? That just makes sense, right? And there's only one direction in the body that the body cannot correct on its own, and that's forward, okay, or what we would call anterior. And that means forward this way. So, why are all the old people in our society look like this? They're all hunched over. They're all falling forward. Okay, well, it's because they have layers and layers of these anterior vertebra or forward vertebra stacked up on each other. So, if we know that the body can correct everything except for forward vertebra, well, we only want to correct the forward ones, right? And that doesn't mean that there's not other bones out of place in other directions in the body. It means that the forward ones are the primary problem. They're the thing that you can't fix on your own, that you need a chiropractor for. The other ones are actually compensations. So you may have vertebrae that are twisted or torqued or turned to the side, and those are actually compensations. Now, the definition of a compensation is something that the body does to compensate for something that it can't fix. Okay, so as a chiropractor, you don't really want to adjust or fix compensations because the body put them in there for a reason. Okay, well, the way I was doing things before for the last couple years, I didn't have a way to decipher what was a compensation and what was a primary problem that the body couldn't fix on its own. So it was challenging. I was fixing everything. I would fix everything in people's bodies, and most of you have experienced that. We were adjusting a lot of things in your body. Okay, there was a lot of adjustments going on when you came in for a visit. And what I now know is that a lot of those, or most of those, were compensations. Okay, so you can understand why you would feel better, because a lot of times the compensation is where it hurts. Actually, all the time, the compensation is where it hurts. Unless you've had acute trauma. If I punch you in the arm and your arm hurts, well, it's the arm. But if you just have this pain over time, you wake up from sleeping, you have this chronic pain in your low back, it's a compensation, and compensations are what hurt in your body because the body is taking stress off of a primary problem that it can't fix and putting the stress somewhere else. And that's where it hurts. Okay, so what I now know is that I was adjusting a lot of compensations in the body, and it made people feel better because it took the stress off the area that hurt. But what happens when you adjust a compensation? Well, the body will either put it right back in, and that's why some of you maybe were coming in with the same thing all the time, like, oh man, it's T4 again, doc, and I'd adjust it, it'd feel better, and then 2 days later, T4 again. Because compensations get put right back in, or the body may reorganize in a different way that may or may not be better for you. Okay, so this concept that the body is self-correcting most of the time, only forward problems or anterior vertebra are the things it can't fix. And so that is what we want to look for and correct. And actually, with this new technique, there is an objective way of determining what's a compensation and what's a primary problem. And so there's no guesswork, there's no intuitiveness, there's no subjectivity around me figuring out or guessing what is a compensation and what's a primary problem. It's a very objective way of me challenging things in your body, basically asking your body a question and your body giving me a response, and then we adjust that thing, and then we can check it again to see if the adjustment actually worked or not. Sometimes it doesn't, and you have to do it again. So that's one of the two major differences, is we're only going to adjust anterior vertebra. We're only going to adjust the primary problems the body can't fix on its own. And then the cool thing is, after you adjust those, the body goes through something called unwinding, which means if we relieve a problem in the body that it couldn't fix, it no longer needs those compensations that it put in. And your body will actually unwind out of those compensations over the next couple hours or in 3 days. Generally, it doesn't take more than 3 days to unwind to the next problem that the body can't fix on its own. So, very cool stuff. The other thing that I learned from this technique that I didn't know before, and that chiropractors and bodyworkers had been missing for years. Most chiropractors and bodyworkers were thinking from the bone out. So either the bone is out of place, or the muscle is pulling, or there's a ligament, or something from the bone out. But actually there's a mechanical structure inside the bones that has a huge deal with whether an adjustment holds or not. Okay, you guys ever hear that, like, oh, you get adjusted and then, the same thing comes back and it's like the adjustment didn't hold. Well, if you adjust a bone and it goes back in place, why would it not hold? What would allow it to not hold? It really doesn't make sense that an adjustment wouldn't hold, except that there is a structure that can pull it back out of place. Okay, so, you guys have heard me talking about how the bones and the neurology are in relation to each other. So that we have a brain and a spinal cord, and that drops down the spinal canal, and so the bones wrap around the cord, right? Well, there's a covering, or something called the meninges, that goes around the brain and the spinal cord, okay? You may not have heard the word meninges, but if you can picture the brain and the spinal cord, and then that's bathed in fluid, that there's fluid around the cord and the brain, and that's for protection and to bring nutrients, and that the covering is over that. Okay, so between this covering and the cord and the brain is fluid. Okay, so we've got a space between the meninges and the cord and the brain. Now, what can happen? Well, first of all, there's mechanically, there's a very, very complex, very dynamic, and very intimate relationship between this covering and the bones. Okay, there's actually a ligament on each side. So every bone has 2 ligaments that attach to the meninges, or this covering, and it's elastic. It's like they're like bungee cords. Okay, and so if a bone goes out of place, well, it pulls on the meninges. It pulls on it, and it pulls it and tethers it. And what happens is that if the meninges, or the covering, is touching the cord for more than 6 weeks, an adhesion forms. Okay, so an adhesion is this being stuck to this. It's scar tissue. I'm going to give you an example, and it's a little bit graphic, but it's very true. Is that if we cut the skin on your fingers here and here, and we taped your 2 fingers together, that in 6 weeks they would be stuck together. Okay, there'd be adhesions between there, and we'd have to pull them apart to get them back apart. Same concept, that this covering can get stuck to the cord. Okay, now what happens if a bone goes out of place and the meninges adheses to the cord? Well, we can adjust that bone, and many of you have probably experienced this. You come in, it hurts somewhere, we adjust it, it goes, and it feels great, and the bone moved, and then boom, in an hour, 3 hours, 3 days, a week, the bone goes right back out of place. Well, that's because we didn't address the meningeal adhesion. And that meningeal adhesion will yank the bone right back out of place. Okay, so this is a new concept. This is something that I learned that I didn't know about before. And it's profound. Okay, what I now know after working with this technique over the last few months is that if you address the meningeal adhesions and you release the meningeal adhesions, which is done through a manipulation, and then you adjust the bone, there's no way that it doesn't hold. It's impossible for it to go out of place, okay, back out of place. There's nothing to yank it back out again. Okay, so these are the two things here. This is these anterior vertebrae that we're going to be adjusting and the meningeal releases. Okay, so these are the two kind of new things or different things that I'm going to be doing. Basically, we're going to be checking you for meningeal adhesions and releasing them first. Then we'll be addressing these anterior vertebrae, and we'll only be adjusting the anterior vertebra. After that, your body will go through an unwinding period. Okay, so this unwinding period is the body unwinding out of the compensation patterns that it has put in to deal with these vertebrae that it can't correct on its own. So I'm really excited about this. This technique has given me my life back. It's given me the ability to go ride my bike for 5 hours and not be in pain. And then I did this trial and had massively awesome results with clients that had been coming in for years with the same problem. And so this technique is not palliative, which means it's not just to make you feel better in the moment. It's actually deep structural care that reverses trauma out of your body and makes you whole again. It sounds crazy, but this technique actually fixes people. So I'm really excited to start doing this work with you guys. And this video is just an introduction to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And yeah, you're all going to have the opportunity to try this out and ask me questions and go through the process. And I'm really, really excited to bring this to you guys. So I look forward to seeing you all on your first visit with this new technique. And please write down questions and bring them to me. And yeah, just really excited. All right, I'll see you guys in the office.